Hi everyone. So today I wanted to try and show you all a world I've been working on instead of an avatar. I've basically been working on porting the Street Puncher level over from Bone Lab into VRChat. I've mainly been doing this because, well, one, I really like the visual style of Bone Lab, and I've been wanting to try and replicate that in VRChat. Um, However, that's kind of hard to do as Bone Lab uses screen space reflections, which are basically reflections that are all calculated in real time based upon what you see on your screen. So, like for example, if I had it turned on, this elevator door would be reflecting myself in it. However, if I would like put my hand outside over here, like this, you wouldn't actually see the reflection of my hand in the elevator door as well. It's not on your screen. You can see that it's outside of your view. So screen space reflections only work on things that are visible on your screen. If they aren't, they don't work. So essentially, this gives me a whole excuse to actually add in screen space reflections into a world. This has been done before several times in VRChat. However, for what I want to do, to the extent of how I want to do it, usually it's only used on floors. However, I want to try and use it on everything, which I did, and I got it working. And yeah, and essentially, I just want to show you all that working and this world and how cool it can be because it's really, really cool seeing it all working. Um, yeah, anyways, let's move on to the restroom. Alright, so here we are in the restroom. So we just came out of the elevator door, which is right behind the camera, which you can't quite see. But essentially why we're here is that this is actually where I have the toggle for turning on and off the screen space reflections, and also a good example of showing you of what they could do and how useful they could be as well. So I'm going to bring the camera right over here so you can see the magical button that I've created for, I mean, it's not really magical, but it's fun. I don't know. Well, not really, but yeah. So essentially this button, it's just a placeholder for now. Eventually I'll create an entire menu for it for adjusting all the settings of the reflections and other settings for the world. But for now, all this does that, it just turns on and off the screen space reflections. So essentially, if you look at that bucket back there, you kind of see that it kind of stands out. It doesn't quite fit in with the lighting around it. And that's mainly because, well, hi, future me here. I've realized my explanation of reflection pros back there wasn't super great, so I want to kind of go back and redo that really quickly. So basically what reflection probes are, well, they're an image. So here, let me start over. So basically, there's a reflection probe right here, approximately right here at least. And essentially, it takes a 360 image of the entire area, well, the entire world that it can see, so it can only see this elevator. So basically, it takes a 360 image of this room, of this elevator, and it saves that into an image. And then from there, whatever is within range of the reflection probe, it has a box that you set. It's basically like a bounding box that says that if there's anything that's inside this box, then project that image onto that model for its reflections. And basically, from that, you get reflections, and it's really cool. Like if I turn gold, for example, you kind of see the whole reflection of the elevator being projected onto me. It's really, really cool. There are other types of reflections like world space and box projection. I'm not going to go into those right here. Well, right now at least. But yeah, that's basically how reflection probes work. They're really, really cool and they make things look really, really nice too, if you know how to use them correctly. And yeah, they're super cool. Anyways, let's get back to it. And yeah, it's quite cool. Reflection probes are really, really cool because they do a lot of really cool stuff and make things look really, really great. However, there are some times where they aren't super great, like there. However, with screen space reflections, since you're calculating all the reflections in real time, it can look really nice, like this. So if you look at that bucket back there, it actually blends in a lot nicer than how it did before. It's really cool. And like, I'm gonna switch back over to being normal and not all shiny and gold. And if I grab this bucket, you'll actually kind of see that, well, it actually reflects my hand and everything else as well. It's a little bit hard to show here, but yeah, it's really cool because it actually calculates everything in real time. It reflects everything as well that's visible on your screen, like even the button too. It's really, really cool. You might have noticed though this did drop my frame rate a um, bit. I don't have the greatest computer. I do everything on a laptop, but it works well enough. Some areas it runs better, some areas it runs worse, but it's not too bad. Well, in my opinion at least. For others, it may be better or worse, depends on your setup. But yeah, it's really, really cool, as you could see. However, it may not always look super great as well. I'm going to turn the camera around right now to show you what I'm talking about. Oh, there we go. And you kind of see right here that this is mentioned, this is said to me by a friend when I showed them this place, that it looks like a bunch of little tiny ants crawling down. Oh, not in frame. There we go. Well, basically, it looks like a bunch of little tiny ants crawling down the um, door. But yeah, this is basically caused as well. I lowered the settings of the reflections just to make sure that they actually don't hurt your computer or make it crash and die. Um, but again, you'll be able to adjust the settings of all the reflections and everything when I actually get the menu all set up and done. Yeah. Oh, something else I just noticed, a really cool example of it, is that if you look over here, I'm going to move over here. I'm going to rotate you around right down here. If you look right here on the reflection, you actually see the reflection of the caution tape on the ground. It's really, really cool. You can see my hand as well. It's really, really cool of what it could do. All right, now I'm going to move over to the mirror. This is pretty cool. It's not super great, but it is pretty cool. So I'm going to show you guys that. All right, so essentially, this is a mirror that uses screen-based reflections. I mean, everything in this world does when you push that button. But if you look here, it's really cool. It is a bit jittery and jaggy. It's not super great. You see the reflection of the radio too right there. You see that when I move it around. It moves as well. It's super, super cool. But yeah, it's not the greatest thing ever, as you could see. It causes some issues as well. You can see like a little ghosting of here where my hand is blocking it's trying to get the reflection of the radio back there, but since my hand is actually blocking it, it can't quite get it. It gets like a little bit of a transparent, you get like a little transparent hand ghost of my hand. It's kind of funny. But yeah, I'm gonna put an actual mirror here so you don't have to deal with this. Um, yeah, but yeah, that's this. Next, I'm gonna move on to, well, that door right over there. And then there is the pub bar area, and yeah, let's go right over there. Well, let's head on over there, I guess. Yeah. All right, so now we're in the bar drink area, I guess you could call it. And again, I just want to show more examples of screen-based reflections. Like, for example, the sign up there and how you can see the reflection of the neon tubes reflecting off the back metal galvanized plate. And also how you see the reflections of the holographic sign in the table or in the bar. Yeah, it's really cool. It's like normally you can't really do that with reflection probes, and it's really cool. Also, something else as well. I don't know how well it's going to show up, but like all the bottles do as well. So if I hold this up, you might be able to actually see. Well, maybe. I can't tell really, but you should be able to actually see the reflection of my fingers going off of the bottle and reflecting off of it. It's really quite cool. Might be better if I hold it like this. I don't know, but I think you get the idea. Yeah, something else I wanted to show as well is that there's a guitar on the wall over there, and that is really, really cool because, well, the smoothness on it, or basically the clarity of the reflections, are set to the maximum, so you're able to really, really see those screen space reflections super, super well, similar to the mirror in the bathroom. So I'm just going to bring you over there really quickly. And here we go. All right, cool. So I'm going to grab this. And what I really like doing is like just holding this like this, and you can see the reflection of me just off the surface of the guitar. It's really, really cool because, like, for example, you won't be able to see this yourself, but if you're holding the guitar and you start strumming it, you see the reflection of your hand in the guitar while you're strumming it. It's really, really cool. Um, but yeah, that's what I wanted to show over here. Yeah. All right. Next, move on to one final place while the guitar slowly floats down because I didn't put gravity on that while I disabled it, thinking it would do something else. But anyways, let's head back over to the seating area where I want to show one last thing, and then I'm going to show the Unity project and a little bit how it works internally and such. All right, let's go. So I was trying to decide whether or not I want to keep doing these goofy transitions, and I was going to stop, but they're just so good. Look, It just makes it so much more fun to do this. I know it's probably painful, but I'm just doing this for my just for my own fun, pretty much. Yeah. Anyways, let's continue on now. Alright, next I want to show you the reflections in the seating area. More specifically in the floor and the countertops, well, the tabletops. Yeah, and so basically, if you look at the reflections on the floor, you might be able to make out the reflections of the chair legs in the floor. It's a small little detail. It's a little bit hard to see probably from the position of the camera right now, but if I bring you lower to the ground, oh, that's the wrong thing there. If I bring you lower to the ground, like this, you should be able to make it out quite a bit better. Yeah, there you go. So maybe a little bit hard to see, but it should be a little bit easier. It's a really cool small little detail that I just wanted to show. Lastly, I'm going to bring you back up here and show you, and I just want to show you the reflections in the tabletops. It's really quite cool. Here, let me straighten this out a little bit for you. There we go. All right, cool. And you could see, yeah, and you could see right here, you see the reflection of the TV monitor or the computer monitor in the reflection of the countertop. It's really cool. And like, for example, if, I don't know, you're sitting here with some of your friends or something, or you might be able to actually see the reflection of your friends or other objects in the tabletop while you're sitting here. It's really cool. And like, I can pick this up. I can move this down here. Oh, oops. I can move this down here and you could see it. Yeah, I don't know, it's just really, really, ooh. Yeah, I still need to make a toggle for colliders and such, for chairs, and adjust some stuff as well. So it's not perfect right now, but yeah, yeah, it's really, really neat. Um, yeah, to more easily show the reflections of the avatars in the tabletops, I'm gonna change into something else. Let's see, like this. It's a bit more glowy, or glowy. And you could basically see, actually, you could a lot more clearly see the reflection of myself in the tabletops. It's really, really cool. Uh, but yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to show in VR of the world. Next I'm gonna be next. Oh, next I'm gonna be moving on into Unity, where I'm gonna show you how more of the screen space reflections work in depth a little bit, and also some other smaller things about the world. And yeah, um, yeah. Anyways, let's move on. Alright, so here we are in Unity. I'm just going to basically show more about screen space reflections and how they work, and also kind of some other smaller bits about the world, more in terms of shaders. Um, I was going to go a lot more in detail, and I tried to go a lot more detail, and specifically on how space reflections work, and the workarounds that you need to use to get them to work in VRChat and such. However, that failed disastrously. Well, it just went really, really badly, and yeah, I couldn't do it. I'm gonna try again in the future, but for now, I'm not gonna worry about that. I'm just gonna go into kind of how I think I've made them a bit more optimized in VRChat, and kind of, I don't know, just how they work in this world, I guess, and not into the nitty-gritty details of how screen space reflections themselves work, but just how I used them in this world and how I got them to work in this world. Um, yeah, so let's get started. All right, so for screen space reflections, in most world, people just use them on the floors and such. The reason for this is that basically screen space reflections, in order for them to work, they need to actually know the color of your screen. And basically, you need to get that into a texture so that you could use that in a shader. And the cool thing is, there's a thing called a grab pass, which basically samples your entire screen or saves your entire screen into a texture, which could then be used in a shader, which is super, super cool. However, with a grab pass, if you're using one on a shader, Basically, it'll basically grab everything on the screen. However, on the shader that's actually using the grab pass, it won't actually render itself. It'll render everything else except for itself, which is a problem. Because let's say, for example, that these both have screen space reflections, and since they're both trying to basically, since they both aren't being rendered, so since they're both using grab passes, well, since they're both using screen space reflections, they need a grab pass. Since let's say the floor and this door is using screen space reflections, when it actually renders a grab pass to be used in the shader, they're both not going to be visible. So you're not actually going to see either of them in the reflection. So you won't see the door in the reflection of the floor, and you won't see the reflection of the floor in the door. That's kind of a problem. So in any worlds, VRChat worlds that use screen space reflections, they only use them on the floor because, well, if you're looking at a floor and you're basically bouncing, for screen space reflections to work, they basically bounce a ray in the direction of the camera and then it bounces off an object. And if you follow that ray, when it hits something, it grabs its color and it basically projects that color back onto that object. And that's very, very basic explanation of how they work. They just basically cast a ray, it bounces off the object, it grabs the color of something they hit, and it projects it back onto the object. So like if you're only using screen space reflections on the floor, it's only ever casting a ray upwards. It's never casting a ray downwards. And so because of that, well, it works. I completely lost my train of thought. Okay, I think I've regained my train of thought. So basically the reason why worlds that use screen space reflections only do them on the floor is that if you have them on anything, I mentioned that if anything is using screen space reflections, it requires a grab pass. But if that model or material is using a grab pass, then it doesn't actually render itself in that grab pass. So if this has a grab pass or is trying to sample the entire screen from that grab pass, it won't actually render itself. So it won't see itself when it captures the entire screen to be used in the screen space reflections. So if you're using the screen space reflections on both the door and the floor, well, when you sample that texture to be, well, when you sample the screen texture to be used in the screen space reflections, it won't actually see the door nor the floor. So when the door itself is trying to get the screen space reflections, it won't see the floor. Because you're basically, if you're looking down at the door like this, you'd want to see the reflection of the floor in it. But however, since they're both using screen space reflections, it doesn't sample, well, it doesn't sample the floor. And if you're looking down at the floor, wanting to see the door in the reflection, well, it's not going to be there because they're both using screen space reflections. So it's not going to work. So basically, if you're only using screen space reflections on the floor, well, if you're only using them in the floor, well, then you don't have that issue because you're only doing it in the floor, and so everything else is being rendered, which doesn't use screen space reflections. So that's basically why worlds in VRChat don't really use screen space reflections other than in the floors, and that's it. I hope I did an okay job at explaining that. If you have any questions, you could always put them in the comments and I will answer them the best I can. Um, Anyways, yeah. So to basically get around that, what I did is that it's kind of funny. Basically, I have two meshes. One that uses screen space reflections and one that does use screen space reflections. So one that does and sorry, one that doesn't and one that does. And the reason why I do that is that I mentioned that if there's a model, well, if it's using screen space reflections, it doesn't. Never mind. Okay, let's continue. So one does use screen space reflections, one doesn't. And since we have, and basically both of these models are in the exact same spot. There's no difference to them at all. They're literally just duplicates of each other. But since, let's say for example, let me turn this on as well down here. So since we have two overlapping meshes of one that does use screen space reflections and one that doesn't, essentially, since they're overlapping perfectly, and because of something called render queue, which I'm not going to go into right now, and some other stuff, basically, the screen space reflections model is being rendered on top of the door right here. And because of that, we only see that screen space reflections model and not the actual other door, the duplicate door that's, oh, oops, wrong example, that's right right inside of it. And so basically what's going on, the reason why I do this is that, well, if we want to have screen space reflections of, let's say that since these are both using the screen space reflections both on the door and on the floor, well, basically, since it's basically not rendered, well, when we actually sample that screen texture, we're not seeing the floor nor the door. But since we have that other model in there that's not using screen space reflections, it will actually see that model in the reflection. So essentially we get around that. And yeah, which works really, really well. However, we end up rendering the entire world twice, which is really quite bad. Yeah. I did some other stuff too to help with that. Do my best to help. Well, to do my best to help with it. Also, one other side effect of this is that if you're using baked lighting, you have to basically have two sets of light maps. Here we are, for both. For both the screen space reflections. Well, for the duplicate and the not duplicate models. You can see that right here. There's like duplicate light maps of everything. Yeah, so that makes it even bigger in file size, which isn't super great, but file size isn't really a concern for this world very much, so it's okay. It's okay. But yeah, since we're rendering the entire world twice, as you've now found out the dark secret about this world, yeah, it's not super great. Yeah. Basically, to help with that, I'm just turning stuff off right now. Basically, to help with that, I made the shaders as simple as I possibly could. So traditionally, if you know Unity's, here I'm just going to create new material really quickly. Oh, traditionally, if you know Unity's standard shader, it uses basically both metallic and smoothness. I'll just turn on my little sphere here that I use for testing really quickly and put this on here so you can see it a little bit better. Yeah, and so essentially, Unity standard shader, which a lot of you probably use, or some other shader like Mochi or Poyomi or something like that, basically you have your metallic slider or your smoothness or roughness slider, which just controls basically how smooth the reflection is, and metallic just controls how metallic the surface looks. But there's also something else as well, which is basically specular, which is similar. You have the same smoothness control, but then you also have a specular color, which basically controls the color of the reflection, which is really quite cool. It gives you a little bit more control over things and simplifies calculations inside. But yeah, basically the specular just controls the brightness of the reflection and essentially what color that reflection is. It's really cool. It's just like the metallic setup, but a little bit different. In the metallic setup, instead, the color of the main albedo texture controls the color of the reflection. The funny thing is, actually, between the standard and specular setup, they're both exactly the same. However, the normal Unity standard shader actually internally converts it over to specular, which is a itsy bitsy tiny bit more expensive. So if we just start using specular textures instead of metallic smoothness textures to begin with, then it's a little bit faster. So for all my textures, I converted everything over to basically specular. So yeah, so we just have our specular map, and then we have our smoothness in the alpha channel. So we don't have metallic and smoothness maps. There's also one more channel as well that we'd usually use. I'll pull out a model really quickly just to basically demonstrate that. There's also another texture that we use as well, which is called ambient occlusion. However, my dummy is not here, so I'm gonna have to bring him over really quickly. Almost here. I'm sorry about the delay. Should have had this ready beforehand. Okay, there we go. So here's our dummy, and let's put on the material for him. Here we go. Awesome. So basically we have our metallic map, which just defines how metallic certain bits are, and our smoothness, which just defines how smooth certain parts of the model are. But we also have another channel. I'm not going to talk about emission or normal maps this time. But for the ambient occlusion, basically it's called ambient occlusion map or an occlusion map or an AO map. They're all the same thing, just different names. Basically what ambient occlusion means is that it basically occludes the ambient lighting or makes it look darker. So basically if I turn down the influence, you can see, actually if you look right here, you can see basically the darker parts, basically, it's essentially just multiplying the lighting by this texture. Yeah, that's not essentially what's going on. That's, if you really want to simplify it, it's just basically multiplying all the lighting by this texture. And you can see here, you can kind of see that it looks like it has like kind of fake crevices or shadows and such. And basically this texture just, yeah, it occludes the lighting. And you see here that basically just gives the model more depth by occluding certain parts of the model, making it look darker by multiplying basically the lighting by that texture. And it's really, really cool. However, since we want this world to run as fast as possible, we want to use as very few textures as possible. So what I did for this is that in all the textures, I basically yeah, if you look here, you can actually see, well, okay. Essentially what I did is that in the specular maps and also in the oh, actually, let me grab a better texture for an example. Let's grab the floors. Here we go. So here you can actually see, so basically what I did is that for the ambient occlusion, I basically instead of doing this all in the shader, I did this beforehand. So I basically multiplied the specular by the occlusion and also the albedo as well, which isn't quite the correct way to do this, but since it's being done in the world, it's practically exactly the same how it would normally work. If you do this on an avatar, it is similar enough, but not quite right. But yeah, but since we're like pre-multiplying it and applying and pre-multiplying the occlusion texture to everything, we no longer need that extra texture slot. So in my shader that I used for the whole world, here we go. All we have for it is that we just have a albedo, your spec map, your specular map, and your normal map, and that's it. You don't have anything else other than a mission if you need that, or a detail map to add in some extra, to give it a little bit more detail as well, which is very useful. But yeah, that's basically that in terms of shader stuff. Yeah, let's see. What else could I talk about here? Right. Yeah, so I guess I could also talk about how I made this. Well, here, I'm going to talk about. No, actually, I think I'm good for now. I think I'm good. I don't want to do more retakes, so I'm going to be done for now. And yeah, if you have any questions at all about any of this, or if you want me to make another video going into some more detail about stuff about this, then I would be happy to. Yeah. Uh, anyways, yeah, that's it for the Unity section of this. I am really sorry, but I just realized there was one more thing I completely forgot to talk about in terms of screen space reflections and the shader and optimizing and such. For screen space reflections, well, actually let's start out with normal shaders. You're able to control the smoothness or the clarity of the reflection, which is, yeah, you can see exactly what that is, just makes the reflection more clear or more blurry. With screen space reflections, you want to be able to do the same thing. Oh, if I could put that on. There we go. And with screen space reflections, you're going to want to be able to do the same thing as well, which you are able to. However, the way that this works is really, really costly. You'll basically see that, I'll explain how it works in a second. Actually, I'll just show you how it works right now. So if you remember this example, right, bounce, bounce. Yeah. But when you actually increase this, will decrease the smoothness. So when an object is perfectly smooth, it bounces directly off at the correct angle. But as you decrease the smoothness, instead of going perfectly in the same direction, they're able to start to go in different directions, like yeah, like this direction, or this direction, or this direction, and basically lower the smoothness it is, the more and more it will start going in a more separate direction. So instead of going, so let's say the smoothness is 1, it'll go perfectly like this. 0.9, it'll go a little bit off like that. And then like 0.5 will go like more, or it could even end up going in this direction too. So basically it generates a random number number when it hits the surface, and then basically this smoothness determines how much that number affects the direction of the ray after it hits the object. However, with this, so if we just use a single bounce, well then it doesn't look super great. It's really, really noisy. But if we basically do this multiple times, so let's say like if we just do this once, like this ray goes in this direction, then let's say we come in again, this goes in this, I don't know, it's a bad example. But basically, yeah, it's just really, really noisy. But if you increase the amount of samples, it starts basically doing all the calculations again, but twice. I use that here because it's two samples. So basically, when you're doing one sample, when let's say the smoothness right now is just set it to 0.5 as an example, basically it's just going off once and doing that. When you're doing two samples, it does the same thing twice. But since whenever the ray goes off of it, it goes in a random direction. So let's say, for example, on the first sample, it goes off in this direction. Then the second sample goes off in this direction. So this ray would sample the red, this ray would sample nothing. Well, what it do is then add those two samples together, and then average them out. And so basically, the more times you do that, you basically start to smooth out the reflection more and more and more. It's really cool. However, it's more and more costly because you're repeating the same operation, well, 15 times. And it gets even more and more cost. Well, I guess almost exponentially cost. Not exponentially, but it's really bad. So basically what I did is that the further away you are from objects, the less detail you see them. So for the screen space reflections, I did the exact same thing. So the further away you get from the reflections, the more noisy the reflections become, or the less samples. So basically, it's a little bit of a way to save on performance, just a bit. And you could adjust like the maximum amount of samples, and you could basically adjust the minimum amount of samples as well. So I set like a maximum of 5, and then a min of 1, meaning that the minimum amount of samples will be 1, but I set that to, actually I can't set that to 0 right now because I put a limit on that. I should probably change that. But basically if I like change this to, basically the distance basically determines how far it transitions between 5 and 1 samples. So basically if you go about, I'm not actually sure exactly if this is exactly 10 meters in Unity's size. I think it actually is. I think I did it actually correctly for once, Initiator. But yes, basically, after 10 meters, it'll transition from, so when you're up close like this, it'll be at 5 samples, and then the closer and closer you get to 10 meters, well, the more and more it'll transition from 5 samples to 1 sample. So you can change this to be like 2, so you hear that when I get really close, it's really clear, or somewhat, well, somewhat less noisy. Then as I get further away, it'll get really quickly get really, really noisy. And by adjusting this, basically determines the transition rate between the different sample amounts. And yeah, that's all that's actually thing I wanted to say. I did record a whole like video outro and everything as well. However, I don't think I'm gonna use that now. Yeah, I'm really sorry for this video being really, really messy, and I try to do a better job at explaining things, but I don't think I did a super great job. Still, if you are still here, thank you for sticking around, and I really hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Oh, yeah, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to leave any comments, and I'll answer them. But yeah, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for watching, and yeah, see you all next time.